Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken and welcome back to another video. We've gone over the best champions for every single class in Paladins, so now it's time to see who's the worst. In this video, I'll be ranking the top 5 worst champions in Paladins. These champions are doing really bad in the current meta, and need some love from the devs to make them viable once again. As always, this list is just my opinion, so feel free to let me know who you think the worst champions are in the comment section down below. Also, just because a champion is on this list doesn't mean that you should feel bad for playing them, or that you can't still do good with them if you put in enough practice. It just means that you like a challenge and going against the grain of the current meta. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Number 5. Corvus. Starting off our list, we have the worst support in Paladins, Corvus. Corvus has a number of different problems that make him a pretty bad champion right now, but the main problem that he faces is his lack of healing. Corvus has been both nerfed and power crept over the years, and nowadays his healing just doesn't cut it. He struggles to keep a tank alive compared to most other supports in Paladins, and while he does have the niche of being able to heal anybody across the map, that healing is pretty small. While Corvus does provide other benefits to his teammates like movement speed, lifesteal, and damage reduction, the lack of healing still makes him a pretty lackluster option. On top of that, his other abilities just aren't that great. His teleport is extremely unreliable because of how glitchy it is. Sometimes it just flat out won't work, and other times you run the risk of teleporting through the map and dying. When it does work, it's a fun movement ability, but it's far more inconsistent than other movement abilities in the support class. Corvus' ultimate is also pretty lackluster. It can be used to zone out the point and do a little bit of damage to tanks, but oftentimes people will just heal right through it. It can be used to make Corvus a bit tankier, but it's not even the best support ultimate in that department either. There are just so many better support ultimates in Paladins, and Corvus falls short. While Corvus is still capable of winning games in the right situations, he's just really niche, and gets outperformed by basically every other support in Paladins. He's not nearly as bad as some of the champions we'll get to later, but it's hard to find a worse support than Corvus right now. So, Corvus takes the number 5 spot on this list. Number 4. Yagharoth. Next up, let's talk about the least popular tank in Paladins, Yagharoth. Yagharoth is an extremely unique champion, and while I applaud Evil Mojo to this day for trying something original with this character, that originality ends up being to her detriment, as she's been one of the hardest champions to balance ever since her release. Yagharoth is an extremely clunky character for a number of different reasons. She has 2 stances, one of which gives her good but awkward to control mobility, and one that makes her completely stationary. She has a long cast animation to switch stances, making it very punishing to get up and move around while under fire. Yagharoth slows your sensitivity while shooting, making it difficult to track mobile targets. On top of that, her ultimate has a minimum range from which you can activate it, so if somebody gets close to you, you can't even ult them. Even if they are in your effective range, her auto-aim ultimate can still somehow miss. Even with all of her jank aside, Yagharoth is still a bad character right now. She has a lot of health and damage reduction while stationary, but because she doesn't move and lacks a barrier to cleanse cauterize, she ends up taking a lot of damage and dying really easily. She also has a huge head hitbox that makes her vulnerable to every hit scan character in the game. She sucks against mobile characters too, because her acid is a really bad anti-air weapon. While Yagharoth is an extremely cool champion, her jank and bad balance makes her a pretty awful pick right now unless you really know what you are doing. She can be effective on the right map with high coordination and almost no counters, but matches like that are extremely rare and she's too niche to be a viable pick in most situations. Most of the time, Yagharoth is an ineffective, frustrating, and miserable experience, and so she earns the number 4 spot on this list. Number 3. Moji. At the number 3 spot we have Moji, a character who suffers for the same reason that Yagharoth does. She's too unique. Moji has some of the highest close range damage in the game, but this damage gets held back greatly by the unique gimmicks surrounding her primary fire. Moji is required to build up magic marks against the target to deal large amounts of damage to them, and when she can't build up marks, she actually has some of the lowest damage in the game. This makes her uniquely susceptible to every character that can cleanse status effects, and it also makes her totally useless against shields and deployables. Moji also slows herself when she shoots, and she has really short range on her familiar spray that she uses to apply magic marks. She needs to get in close range to do any sort of real damage, but this is made very difficult by her absolutely awful movement ability and her tank-sized hitbox. Players can see Moji coming from a mile away, and they have an easier time hitting her than any other flank in Paladins. Even Skye stands a better chance of sneaking up on a target and surviving in close range than Moji, which should put into perspective just how bad Moji is. Moji has tank-sized mobility, range, and size, but with a flank-sized health pool, and this just makes her awful in today's meta. Despite this, she does have some redeeming qualities. Her sustain is much higher than the average flank between her cards and her magic barrier, and her ultimate can be a powerful execute when used properly. These qualities keep her from being the worst flank in the game, but they don't save her from ranking as one of the weakest characters in Paladins. So, Moji takes the number 3 spot on this list. Number 2. Caspian. Coming in at number 2 we have Caspian, the absolute worst flank in Paladins by every metric. His win rate and pick rate are in the toilet, and when you look at his kit, it's easy to see why. Caspian has one of the worst movement abilities in the flank class. It's useful because it can travel vertically, but that is literally the only good thing about it. It's extremely slow by default, which forces you to use cards to make it faster. And even when it goes fast, it's still the most telegraphed movement ability in the flank class. It's very easy to track, and at the end of the dash, he stops and twirls in place. Caspian practically begs the enemies to shoot him when his dash ends, which is not what you want when you're playing a 2100 HP flank. Caspian, like Moji, has a unique gimmick with his weapons that allows him to have high damage output, but at a cost. Caspian has to build up stacks for his weapons to finally start doing good damage, and he has to build up these stacks by hitting other enemies. So, when Caspian starts the round, he has to spend a lot of time tickling the enemies before he can actually become a serious threat. These stacks are also tied to his stun, since you can only reliably hit his stun if you actually have a few stacks built up. Caspian's gimmick makes him even clunkier than Moji at times, and is one of the main reasons why nobody plays this guy. However, it gets even worse. While Moji at least has her magic barrier and cards to give her some staying power in a fight, Caspian doesn't even have that. He has no defensive ability at all, and his cards leave much to be desired on the sustain front. Even though his hitbox is smaller than Moji's, his lack of any defense plus his pitiful movement ability actually make him easier to kill than Moji at times. In my opinion, the only redeeming quality of Caspian is his ultimate. His ultimate powers up his damage to frankly absurd levels, and it's very satisfying to wipe out the enemy backline or melt a tank with his ultimate. However, when your only saving grace is your ultimate, you're not a very good champion at all. Kazvis may have some of the most stylish gold skins in Paladins, but they're not actually strong champions in a real fight. Caspian and Corvus get matching titles as the worst champions in their respective classes, and Caspian earns the additional title of the second worst character in all of Paladins. As if I haven't thrown enough shade in this video, I've still got a few more champions to get to before we see who the worst champion in Paladins is. Up first, we have Kinessa, who's one of the worst damage champions in the game at the moment. Kinessa got hit hard by her fire rate nerf many months ago, and while she's gotten a few buffs since then, she's still one of the most ineffective champions you can pick right now. On most maps, she's a throw pick, but the thing that keeps her from getting an official ranking are the 2 maps where she's actually still the meta, Frog Isle and Fish Market. As a sniper, Kinessa is very map dependent, and a lot of maps either don't have good sightlines for snipers, or they make it really easy to flank them. On Frog Isle and Fish Market, that's just not the case. Kinessa enjoys some of the longest sightlines in the game and can see flankers coming from a mile away on these maps. She's very hard to punish, and is one of 2 different reasons why I wish these maps would be deleted from the game. The next dishonorable mention is Terminus, who struggles as the only true melee character in this game. Terminus has the most pitiful range in Paladins, and this makes him even more ineffective than Yagharoth against any highly mobile flying champion. Without extensive use of his speed card, he also isn't inherently any faster than your average less mobile character. Even if he does get close to a target, he barely does any damage to them. The only way he gets serious bursts is if the enemies feed him power siphon charges, which is easier said than done against skillful players. Terminus does have some redeeming qualities that save him from replacing Yagharoth in the number 5 spot. His Power Siphon is genuinely a really good ability. It's a massive directional cylinder that can block infinite numbers of damage before it runs out, and it forces the enemies to respect it and not shoot at Terminus as long as he holds it up. In situations like playing against a lot of blasters on ice mines, his Siphon can actually be really useful. Terminus, while buggy and bad in a lot of ways, still has more situations where you'd be inclined to pick him over Yagoroth, so he gets spared an official ranking on this list. Number 1. Kasumi. And in the number 1 spot we have the champion everyone saw coming, Kasumi. Kasumi may genuinely be not just the worst champion in Paladins for Season 6, but the worst champion in all of Paladins history. She has a staggering and embarrassing 36% win rate that she is barely clinging on to, which is lower than any other champion in the game by a country mile. Kasumi has been brutally murdered by the devs, but this is for good reason. On release, she was a disgustingly overpowered character who stomped casual players left and right because she has the worst character design in Paladins history. Kasumi on release had an auto-aim cone that was tied to her primary fire, secondary burst, and her ultimate. She required less aiming skill than using Lex on controller, to put into perspective how brain-dead this character was. Now, her cone is much smaller to the point of being nearly equivalent to true aiming, which turned her from a disgustingly broken character to a character that has pretty lackluster and clunky DPS. On top of her auto-aim being removed, the devs also added a missing animation for when you press the shoot button but fail to hit a target. This animation actually makes missing on Kasumi more punishing than the average character, because it interrupts the entire flow of her gameplay and is also insanely buggy. You see, when you miss on a normal character, nothing really happens and you just go and fire the next shot. When you miss on Kasumi, you're punished by not being able to shoot for about a second, which feels absolutely awful. And sometimes, the miss animation will play when you still do damage. This change made her one of the clunkiest characters in Paladins, and made her already bad damage even worse. Her other abilities are also really bad, and have been since release. Her spirit lures, while a genuinely cool mechanic, are very unreliable, and enemies can often exploit these lures to bait out Kasumi and get her killed, making them more of a trap for Kasumi than her enemies. The only way to make them viable is to use spirit bombs, which is basically her only viable talent at this point. Even then, they're not a great tool. Kasumi's movement ability is also one of the worst abilities in the entire game. She stands completely still, gaining a bunch of damage reduction while piloting an ethereal spirit which she'll teleport to after a length of time. That's right, her movement ability causes her to stand still. This is easily exploitable by the enemies, and it's very easy to die while using this ability. And here's the worst thing about it, you can't even cancel the ability early to teleport to your spirit. You can cancel it early to teleport to your body, making it so you actually go nowhere at all, but you can't teleport to your spirit early, which would be an actual useful ability to have. I didn't think they can make a movement ability worse than Caspian's, but here we are. Kasumi is by far and without question the worst character ever added to Paladins. She adds nothing to the game except pain and suffering for everyone involved. She's not fun to play as, she's certainly not fun to play against, and now she is so bad that she's a dead weight to have on your team. Evil Mojo has never deleted a character before, but I think it would be good to make an exception for Kasumi and rid the game of this pestilent waste. She is beyond saving without a total rework of her kit, and even then, her reputation is so damaged that I doubt anyone would even care if she did. There is no reason this character should have ever been added to the game in the state that she was, and she is all but forgotten by the community except for those people who remember how putrid she used to be. She is a dead ghost of a champion, and I strongly advocate for Evil Mojo to refund everybody of their purchased skins and wasted time, and remove this champion from Paladins once and for all. But anyways, that's going to be the end of this video. Who do you think is the worst character in Paladins? Let me know in the comments section down below. While you're down there, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from me. You should also check out my Twitch channel and Discord server, both of which are linked in the description. And if you want to support this channel, then consider making your next crystal purchase over at my Nexus by going to nexus.gg/AndrewChicken. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching, I will see you all next time, peace out.